Hi, I'm Lisa Sanchez, and I'm able to interview through my job, obviously, a lot of mayors, but Mayor Margo, I feel like this has been the strangest term for being a mayor of any other city I've seen out there. You are dealing with a pandemic, you are dealing with a huge tragedy that happened on August 3rd. So I think it's kind of good to let people get to know you a little bit better and kind of who you are, where you came from, and how your upbringing really made you become this leader that has just kind of taken the city so far during this time and really been the pillar that we needed in this community. And I mean, I've said that on air before to you, that I think the way that you have really led all of us in this city is just really commendable. And so I just kind of wanted to get to know you a little bit more. So
Sure.
So some people may be actually shocked to learn that you aren't actually born and raised in El Paso. So you are, like me, you're a transplant. So what is your family history? Where are you from, and how did that happen?
Well, I do have Texas roots. They go back to the Rio Grande Valley. In 1850, my great-great-grandfather came from France through New Orleans, and came up the Rio Grande and settled in Rio Grande City in 1850. Back then it was Margot, and Margo was spelled that way. He was Robert. He married a woman from Mexico, my great-great-grandmother, and I think they had 3 or 4 children, but only one son. His name was Ruperto, my great-grandfather, and my middle name is Rupert, after him. Ruperto married a woman from Ciudad Mayer, and I remember her referred to as Mama Chia. And they had 10 children, and my grandfather Elias was number 7. He didn't speak English till he was 18, and he went to the University of Texas at Galveston Medical School, graduated in 1919, and ended up leaving South Texas and moving to Oklahoma City and became an orthopedic surgeon.
That must have been really hard for him, especially having to learn English so late in life. Did he ever talk about that with any of your family?
He died when I was 14 in a car accident. So we never really got the chance to really go in depth, and I never was able to spend a lot of time with the family in Rio Grande City, which is still there. There's still a great number of Margos down there. It's now Margo down there now. But Grandpa, my uncle, my dad's older brother, was an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
And my dad was born in Oklahoma City. I was born in Oklahoma City. But my dad became kind of I guess I'd say a nice way to say it was a dropout vagabond. I mean, he did finish school, but he dropped out of med school when his older brother was becoming a doctor, and he just ended up traveling around, he was a salesman, and we moved every 3 years growing up. But he either changed jobs, was transferred, or sometimes lost his job.
Yeah. So what about your mom? Because we hear you talk about your dad, but what was your mom like?
Well, her parents were the parents of the Great Depression. My grandfather, L.B., his name was L.B. Sloniker, was from Plainview. Never had more than 8th grade education. He was a partial cripple because when he was working, an oil drum had rolled on his leg, and it was kind of interesting. He was one of the most brilliant individuals I've ever known. While he only had an 8th grade education, he had a mind that was unbelievable, and he could do math in his head faster than calculators. It was unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
He had all these tricks and everything else, but he was a true product of the Depression. Looked at every penny, kept his books on anything he ever gave anybody at any time. But he was great. I was very close to my maternal grandparents. They were the peace and harmony every summer when we would go to. He sold the first pneumatic tractor tire west of the Mississippi for Firestone. And then he ended up working for Phillips 66 Petroleum. Phillips 66 moved to Bartlesville. He was an executive, but he never got very high in his opinion because he never had an education.
Right.
And from the time I was born and to my 2 siblings, he had started a college fund for us.
Do you think maybe that had something to do with it being so important for you to go to college? Because I know that you were a very accomplished athlete. You were good at football. But you wouldn't have been able to go to college, am I correct, if you wouldn't have gotten a scholarship?
That's true. and the amount of funding my grandfather did was interesting, but it wasn't. I mean, it was nice, but it wasn't anywhere near what it would have taken. I'm just fortunate enough to play on a very good high school team in Huntsville, Alabama. When we'd moved there when I was a sophomore from Dallas, and we had a team that signed my senior year 7 Southeastern Conference scholarships off a 45-man team. We were pretty good, and I was fortunate enough to play, and they covered up my limitations pretty well, and I was able to get a scholarship.
So do you think maybe even being on the football team and being a part of that team, did that help you become a leader, especially with winning the games and everything? Did you have any, what did you play? And I'm not very good at football, so I don't really know how this works.
Well, when I was playing, and this is the late 60s when I was playing, and I graduated in the 70s. So my last season was 1969 in high school. I played both ways. I played offensive line and defensive line. So
that's not common now, though.
No.
Okay, I was going to say, that doesn't sound.
No, so I rarely left the game, but thoroughly enjoyed it. And we had, as I said, we had a good half. The coaches, my dad usually was in jobs in which he traveled 5 days a week.
Right.
So he was never at home. Things weren't always calm, cool, and copacetic at home. My parents divorced after about 32 years of marriage, and quite candidly, they probably should have been divorced a lot sooner, and I'm not in favor of divorce necessarily. But so he was gone. The people that had the most impact on my life were coaches. The coaches I played under. I can still quote them. They pushed me. But they
instilled a work ethic as well.
Oh yeah, I remember my high school coach used to say, "We shall labor on Labor Day." So it was always that, and so they had the most impact, and my high school football coach specifically knew that my chances of going to college were slim or none if I didn't have a scholarship, and he worked very hard to help me get that scholarship, and I'll never forget it.
That's amazing. So you did go to college. You did go to Vanderbilt, and initially you wanted to follow in your grandfather's footsteps, correct? You wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon as well?
Well, that was the successful side of the family. My dad was not considered. I mean, he had certain talents, but he wasn't. It didn't really manifest itself into what I would call
prosperous
financial security, more or less. So, in any event, I showed up at Vanderbilt. That's one reason I wanted to go to Vanderbilt, because it had a reputation for physicians and pre-med and things like that, and I knew there was no chance of my ever playing in the NFL. That was not why I was going to Vanderbilt. In fact, at Vanderbilt, typically had a lousy football team. We were usually the doormat of the Southeastern Conference, but there was always optimism. In any event, I started out in pre-med, spent 3 semesters doing pre-med and med chemistry, and was defeated. And then I had to change.
I can definitely relate with that. So.
I became, the dean and I became very intimate because I was on academic probation for 2 semesters. And I'd get my little postcard, "Come see me, let's go talk." So we'd shoot the breeze about football, and I finally figured out I better change my major, which I did. Vanderbilt doesn't have a business major.
Okay.
It's arts and science, or engineering, or nursing, or things like that. And I ended up switching to a history and economics major, thinking maybe I could go to law school.
Okay. And the economics obviously helped you later on in life as well with your different businesses.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. That part I did enjoy.
So when you were in college, there was someone that you met there that obviously had a big impact on your life, and that would be Adair. Now, I know you went on, was it a date? So how did that come about? How did you meet her, and how did you end up asking her out?
Well, there was a couple. A good friend of mine who I was very close with. He played baseball at Vanderbilt, and was a fraternity brother of mine. And he and his girlfriend, eventually wife, set up a bunch of us about 4 or 5 of us on blind dates, and frankly, we're all still married. It's kind of interesting. But,
so they were good matchmakers.
They were, and they set me up on a date. I got hurt my senior year playing football. Tore up my MCL. covering punts, first practice after our first game. And so I was hobbling around on crutches in September of 1973, my senior year, and waiting for surgery. And that was back before arthroscopic, so
Right.
I had major surgery and a cast for 9 weeks
Oh, wow.
on my leg. But so they set me up with this sophomore named Adair Wakefield. And the interesting thing was, I ended up having the date set up, and her father had come in to visit over the weekend. And so I end up, the beginning of the date is with her father and her roommates at a dinner, which was quite unusual.
And then you're still on crutches, right?
And I'm
top
on
of
crutches.
it. Okay.
And then we went out afterwards, and my recollection is, I think we went over to a restaurant bar, and my recollection was, she spent most of the evening in the conversation telling me about the guys she'd gone out with.
What?
But I was still smitten with her for whatever reason. It was
You like to
providential.
challenge?
It was, yeah, kinda, and I just anyway, I was very smitten with her, and kept trying to take her out. We dated some, but not consistently,
Okay.
not solely. And I had dated plenty during Vanderbilt, during my
Time as a
three
football,
years,
yeah.
football player, and so anyway, I graduate, and she's still not allowing me to date her steadily or anything else. So I chased her. I chased her a total of 3 years. And I think the way you all phrase it these days with social media is that she basically friended me for 3 years.
You got friend zoned for 3
Friend zoned. That's
There
what
you
it-
go.
Yeah, I was friend zoned for 3 years, and then finally,
Savage.
I actually deserved it. I just told her one time I didn't deserve it from her, but I probably deserved the treatment for past behavior. But in the event, her mother said something to her about I wouldn't be so cocky if I were you, and lo and behold, we got married on August the 21st, 1976.
And after you graduated, you stayed in the area, correct? Like you stayed out there and
Well,
started.
I graduated 2 years ahead of it.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have enough. The law schools, I did apply to law school, but the
Right.
law schools I was accepted to were outside of Nashville, and I was still chasing her. And I didn't have any money anyway to go to law school. And
Yeah.
so and there was, my grades had, after a year and a half in pre-med, weren't exactly stellar by a long shot. But I did graduate in 4 years. I had to take 18 hours a semester my last 4 semesters to graduate in 4 years, which was kind of a pain. But so anyway, I took the only job. 1974, when I graduated, was a recession. There was a recession, and I could not find a job. It didn't matter that I'd played football at Vanderbilt, graduated from Vanderbilt. It just didn't matter.
Yeah.
So the only door that opened, which I think sometimes is better for people when you're limited on your choices.
Right.
The only choice I had was an offer to sell life insurance, which was probably the last thing that would have ever entered my mind. Had no knowledge of it, and any previous contact had been in college when they were trying to sell me some term insurance that I couldn't afford to begin with. So.
It's interesting that you say you graduated in a recession because, I mean, obviously I did as well. I graduated from college during a recession. And one of the big things is we're, of course, jumping forward, but you want to bring a lot of jobs to El Paso. Do you think maybe your previous experience when you graduated college, having that kind of uncertainty, looking for jobs, things like that, is that one of the reasons you want to start bringing more jobs to El Paso? And because we have UTEP here, we have all these students that are graduating, and then you have what everyone calls the brain drain, where people leave the city. So do you think maybe even your experiences once you graduated from college kind of have a little bit of a, because you understand what we're going through. I say we, but I graduated years ago, but yeah, it was hard growing up and finishing college. I had a 4.0 GPA, and when I graduated from college, it was like, okay, now what? There was no jobs available. So do you think maybe that had an impact on you too?
Oh, I think it's part of my makeup. It's part of my foundation. Sure, I remember what it was like. But I'll tell you, there's a better connection in that I understand the way I was growing up, and especially when my father lost his job prior to my freshman year in college, is to understand what people are going through with this COVID.
Yeah.
I have a better understanding. I mean, I know what it was like. I worked in an iron foundry. I never had a job that required thought till I graduated from college. It was always manual labor. Point and shoot. You had to go do this, go do that, complete that task. And before my freshman year in college, I was working in an iron foundry on the casting line. So I was working in 120-degree heat in Huntsville, Alabama, for a farm implement company, and they had their own foundry, and I worked on the casting line. And it was probably the best shape I've ever been in for football, I'll tell you that. But when my father lost his job, I remember, and I was only on minimum wage, and back then it was probably $1.60 an hour, $1.65, something like that. Yeah. And I remember every Friday going in, and because I was so dirty from working with the coal dust and everything else and the iron, that I'd have to disrobe in the garage, and I would hand my mother my paycheck, not knowing what was going to happen the next time. I mean, I knew I was going to get to go to college, but I didn't know what was going to happen to them or anybody else. And that's a feeling that very few, unless you've been there, you don't really understand. Yeah. You don't understand it. There's a mental health issue to it because you're tense and you don't know when is it going to end, what's going to happen, and so anyway, that I recall vividly. Yeah. And that's why I feel for the people here that I've talked about the COVID pandemic is a physical issue, it is a financial issue, and it's a mental health issue. And the mental health is on both sides of that coin. So anyway, I know what it's like not to need work. Yeah. And it was interesting that the job I had starting out in the life insurance business was $350 every 2 weeks for 6 months. That's all they guaranteed.
And then, of course, they do like the commission, so they
right.
start
You would hope that you,
mm-hmm.
But I was a little bit of a slow starter too. So
that's when you decided to move to El Paso, correct? Around that time afterwards.
No, I spent 3 years in Nashville in the insurance business, and actually started having some reasonable success in sales.
So what made you want to move back, or move to El Paso, but have Adair move back to El Paso?
Adair's father made me an offer. He had a business here. He was running the John D. Williams Company, which was named after Adair's grandfather, who'd started the business in 1929. And it was they only had 5 employees, as I recall, and it was just a small insurance operation, what you would call the proverbial mom and pop shop. Mm-hmm. And he offered me a position to join him in the business. And it was interesting that Adair said she didn't want to come back. She loved Nashville. She was teaching at a private high school, teaching art. She had an art history degree from Vanderbilt. And but I said, I think it's an opportunity for us, and I want to do it. So we moved back. I actually moved back ahead of her because she had to fulfill her teaching contract. Right. I moved back in March. I started with the John D. Williams Company on March 1st, 1977, as a straight commission salesman, and I was the 5th employee, as I recall.
I always like to ask people, especially because, when I moved out here for the first time, I saw El Paso, the city. Do you remember the first time you came down here and what the city looked like, and just what were your thoughts, I guess?
Well, when I was still chasing Adair, I came out here right after I graduated to see her. And I remember flying in from Dallas and the pilot saying that the visibility was 50 miles. And I'm going, that's phenomenal. I'm looking out the window. It was just phenomenal. I'd never been out here. Yeah. I'd never seen, I had lived in Midland till I was 9, but Midland's totally different from El Paso.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one.
And so I remember, and we went to Juarez and drove around, and I just thought this was a great area. I loved it. I've become a desert rat.
Yeah, as a fellow desert rat, I completely understand that. So you came out here and took the job with Adair's father's business. How was your relationship with him? Like, especially because, first of all, you are his son-in-law, but also now you work for him, you're an employee. How did your work dynamic work? And then, of course, at home with the family. And were there any really good things you learned from him in both aspects?
Oh, I learned a lot from him, but also family dynamics in a business are very unique, as many people can tell you.
Right.
I grew up in I wouldn't call it necessarily a dysfunctional family, but there were challenges.
Right.
Because my father always struggled, my mother's father would end up bailing him out. And there was a dynamic there that was just not pleasant. And I learned my grandfather felt he had some control over my father, and my father resented it.
Yeah.
But my father never should have been in that position to begin with. So what I learned with my father-in-law, I had great admiration and respect for him. He was one of the most brilliant individuals I've ever been around in my life. We were very close, but the real reason I think we were is because I wouldn't let things fester.
Yeah.
I saw those things fester in my family growing up, and I'd get it out on the table early. What's the issue? Let's talk about it. Let's deal with this. Let's move on. And he wasn't used to that. Never saw it in my family, but it worked great. We got it out on the table, and when he was right, I would admit it, and if I were right, he would admit it. But basically, I controlled my own destiny because he had me set up as a straight commission salesman. And the way he did it in the insurance business is typically you have first year commission and then you have renewals.
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't let me have any renewals. He gave me 50% of the first year commission, and that was it. So I had to sell new each year. But I liked it.
Yeah.
And it worked out, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But so I was controlling my own destiny, and he was reaping a lot of the rewards of my efforts.
So it was a good relationship.
It was a great relationship, and he was a great businessman. He taught me a lot about investments and things of that nature, about relationships, things like that. It's hard to say you adored your father-in-law, but I did. I thought he was great. He and I were very close. He passed away.
Yeah.
He had a heart cancer, but he died when he was 60 and a half. 6 days after my 29th birthday. And this was in February 9th, 1981. And the preceding December, he had come to me and said, we need to work something out on the perpetuation. I'd worked for him for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And he said, what I'm going to do is, he gave me a handwritten note. He said, I'm going to give you 10% of the business for the next 5 years. And at the end of that 5 years, you can buy me out for the balance of the business, which was fine. I mean, I knew that meant I was working for myself as much as I was for him.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that was never formalized, so it didn't happen. I still have the handwritten name, but it didn't happen, and he passes away, and so there's no written perpetuation plan. None of that's in writing, and so.
You were just kind of thrust in that moment because obviously it was such a shocking thing, having to be the leader of the company, but also, would you say in the family too, or how was? I mean, because I can't imagine.
Well, my brother-in-law was in El Paso, but he was an anesthesiologist and a physician, had nothing to do with the business.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law had married and moved to Tennessee, and was living there with her husband.
Right.
And so it was kind of me.
Yeah.
And the business had been around since 1929, and I wasn't going to let it go. So I convinced my mother-in-law and the banks to give me credit, which I'm not sure in hindsight probably was the smartest move on their part. But it worked out, and we did it. And we built a business and started to grow. The thing was, where it was, you get thrust into these things and you just do what you got to do, especially what my premise has been. I was 29 years old. I had a 2.5-year-old son.
Yeah.
And Adair was pregnant with our second son, who was born in May of that year. So she's 7 months pregnant. Gosh. And I got a 2-year-old. Well, actually, when he just turned 2 the preceding December. And I'm going, oh boy. I had other thoughts that I can't repeat, but
Yeah.
but well, I just figured out I got to do what I got to do.
Yeah, you took the situation that was given to you and just made the best that you could of it at that time.
I felt like that's what I should do.
Right.
I felt led to do that, and I did it.
So at this point, we're now living in El Paso, and like you said, you've become a desert rat. What about the city at that time did you just fall in love with? What did you enjoy about El Paso? Was it the people, the food, all of the above, landscape?
Growing up, moving every 3 years, I hated it. Almost every 3 years, I hated it. You know, Ardmore, Oklahoma, Midland, Texas, Jackson, Mississippi, Dallas, Huntsville, Alabama. I never had roots.
Yeah.
And El Paso gave me roots, and that's what I'll always. That's why I'm still here today. I mean, it gave me roots. I'm not going anywhere else, and neither is Adair. And you know, I love the people, the culture, the uniqueness of our community. That's, you know, we're a special region, and there's nowhere else in the Western Hemisphere like ours.
Yeah, I mean, people always hear me talk about it, and I'm like, you won't understand it until you come visit it. I'm like, so don't sit there and try and understand it. Come see it for yourself. And then when they do, it's mind blowing.
When we were doing the immigration, when we were in the middle of the immigration crisis, and we became ground zero because of a release of immigrants on December the 23rd at our Greyhound bus station, I had agreement with CBP and ICE to give us 24-hour notice because the city was providing some humanitarian support, transportation support, coordination with our NGOs, which was primarily the Annunciation House, who did a great job. So we have a disconnect. They were supposed to give us 24-hour notice in this one particular day. The immigration crisis started in October of 2018 when the Border Sector Chief for Customs and Border Protection, CBP, called me and said, we're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Our detention facilities can't hold them. We're going to have to start releasing them. So they were processing and releasing. And they would give me a text every day on the number of immigrants being released. We would coordinate with Annunciation House and any other NGOs in the region and transportation and do it. Well, they had that one glitch on I'll never forget, it was on December the 23rd, which was a Sunday night. They failed to tell us, and they released a number of immigrants at the Greyhound bus station here. Well, that hit the national airwaves.
Yeah.
We became known as Ground Zero for immigration. And I started doing interviews virtually with every national and international network from that point forward for several months. But my point is that when I would talk to network anchors who were going to come out and interview and see, and as you all may recall, lots of them did. Yeah. And they would call me and ask me to describe El Paso. So I'd cover our demographics, our climate, our high desert, where we're located, our time zone difference, et cetera. The fact that we're due south of Albuquerque, we're far in, on the Mexican border, blah, blah, blah. Because most people think of the Mexican border like San Diego, which is 15 to 20 miles away from.
Yeah.
And
you're not on the border. You think, oh yeah, San Diego, but no, you have to drive,
you
have to park. Yeah, for us, no, we could toss a stone and hit water.
Well, I've brought a bunch of mayors down here for the U.S. Conference of Mayors during the immigration crisis and took them to the top of one of our bank buildings and looked south, and I said, tell me where El Paso ends and Juarez begins. None of them could do it. I'm talking about Mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor of New York, Mayor across America. Yeah. And it was amazing. But that's it. But so I would describe us to these anchors, by the ending of the conversation, I would say, regardless of what I've told you, you won't get it till you get here and see it firsthand. And virtually everyone said that was true. So our biggest challenge, and for me as mayor, has been to get people here to see what we have and understand that we are a unique jewel.
Yeah, when you talk about being mayor, so you actually, I find super interesting, didn't want to get into politics, but you did because you kind of got fed up with the way that the city of El Paso was being represented on a national scale. Am I correct? So what was your initial reasoning for wanting to get into politics in the first place?
Well, I was peripherally involved in support of candidates that I thought were good, irrespective of party. And I did that in the background, financial support and hosting events and things like that for a number of years. But after I was chairman of the El Paso Chamber of Commerce, and I'd go down to Austin during that time, I observed what I perceived to be a lack of proper representation by our delegation in Austin.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were always fighting each other. So one would appear at one hearing and say, El Paso wants this, and another member of our delegation would appear at the hearing and say, no, we don't want that. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Which then makes us kind of look like...
Well, we did. We looked like we didn't ever act together, which we didn't at
Yeah.
the time. I'll tell you today, I think our delegation does a great job, and they work very cohesively together, and we're blessed by that in Austin. And I think the improvements have been shown in the accomplishments of the delegation for our community. But back then, they weren't, and so I said, I want to try to run. So I ran, and I lost. And I've lost more than I've won. But it's kind of like when people come see me and tell me they want to run for office, and my first question to them is, well, if you lose, are you going to run again? And their typical response is, well, I'm not going to lose. Well, I said, well,
Yeah, let me tell you
let
though.
me tell you, you know, your chances are.
I mean, and I think that's something that's really good to know, because that means that you're persistent. You're persistent in also your belief of making the city a better place, and you're persistent in wanting to make El Paso more of a positive on the national stage. Because you're right. I mean, when I first moved out here too, I was just baffled by how many friends didn't, one, know where El Paso was, and two, I don't know if it says something about my friends back home, but when I would say New Mexico, they'd be like, oh, okay, is that near Cancun? I'm like, no, it's not at all. It's a state in the United States. But then I would say El Paso, and they go, that's in Mexico, right? I'm like, no, also not true. I mean, no, we're right there, but no. And it was baffling to me that this is the only way that people knew El Paso, was either through some sort of TV show that they saw or some sort of, but now with the national media that's come to town, I was very shocked to hear how many of them are like, I've never been in a place that's so friendly, that's so nice.
That was what came out. Well,
but the multiple times
Yeah.
when the immigration crisis happened, when Beto was running, with the August 3rd, I mean, all of these media were coming to town, and they would come here for the first time. And I can't remember which anchor it was, but I remember he told me that something happened and he couldn't find his bags, and some nice lady at the airport took him to a hotel. And just, you know, I think that this has all kind of been a situation where you're right. People need to come here for themselves and experience it.
the week post August 3rd, and when I was doing interviews with every national and international media, invariably before or after the interview, whoever was interviewing me, the anchor or whoever, would say, I cannot get over the hospitality of your community in spite of the tragedy. And I think that's what separates us. That's what makes us special and unique. But we also need to be recognized. We are the 6th largest city in the state of Texas,
Yeah.
and the 20th largest city in the United States. We're a player. We're a leader. We're not a bystander. We're not an also-ran. We're unique and special.
Talking about the August 3rd, because I think that's when we first, I became acquainted with you, was because of that. And I kind of want to get into your head a little bit. Where were you on that day when you got the phone call about what happened at the Walmart?
I was in Austin, Texas, at a board meeting of a board that I'm no longer serving on, but that I was at that time. They had a Friday meeting and a Saturday morning. It would end on Saturday morning. And it had ended at 11:30 Austin time, which is 10:30 our time. And I started getting E911 notices on my city phone about a shooting. But it was kind of the proverbial fog of war kind of thing. I'd get one that said, there's been a shooting, no fatalities. And then there'd be one that said, we think there may be multiple shooters, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it just went on and on. Didn't get a lot of clear information. And I wanted to go by and see one of my former staffers from Austin who had just had a little boy. And I wanted to see the baby. And I was due to fly out that evening at 6 p.m. on a Southwest flight back to El Paso. So I get over to his house to see the child, and there's the news. I think he had it on Fox or CNN or something, but there's the live, live pictures of what's going on there. And then I'm starting getting more information from E911 and our city manager, and I said, gee, I got to get home.
Yeah.
And he had access to a plane, and I said, because I couldn't wait till 6, this is like noon.
Yeah.
I said, I can't wait till 6, I got to get home. And so he coordinated a plane to get me
charter
back.
plane,
yeah. And we jump in his car, and I'm heading to the airport. And on the way to the airport, I get a call from the governor, and he found out I'm here, and he says, we talk about it, and he says, do you want to ride with me? And I said, I'm already almost to the airport now. I'll meet you in El Paso. We got to get back. I can't wait any longer. So got on a plane and looked out the window and prayed. That's about all I could do.
And when you were in the air, I don't think that you had service or anything. So you were basically, for the, I believe, hour and a half that the flight is, you had no idea.
No idea. I had nothing. Fact is, the last E911 notice I'd had said that there still may be multiple shooters. And I'll never forget, CNN called me, and it was Wolf Blitzer saying, what do you know? And I said, this is all I know. And I got on the plane and left. And then I was met. We went over to the emergency 911 center, and I started getting briefed by the police, by the FBI, by DPS, by the FBI, and everyone else. And I saw this missive or manifesto, or whatever you want to call it, written by this evil white supremacist who had to come from 700 miles away to attack us of who we are.
Who'd never been here before.
Never been here. And I am convinced, and I've said this on numerous occasions, nobody from our region would have ever done that. It's not who we are. This guy, this person, this evil had to come from out of town.
The thing that really resonated with me a lot was seeing you over those next few days, and just not only on the news, but then also in person. And I really don't think people comprehend or realize how much this impacted you. The way that you would go to every funeral to mourn and be with the community. I just was so amazed and impressed with your leadership in that moment. But why was it so important to you to be there for every single funeral that you could attend, for the families to be with them out there, mourning with them, essentially?
Well, it was an attack on who we are. I'm our mayor, and I couldn't let that go. I don't ever want to have to do that again. It was personal. It was personal, and it still is personal to me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. I did the best I could. But I wasn't going to let El Paso, Juarez, or Southern Mexico, our region, be attacked like that.
And I think it is so important to recognize the fact that I think all of us as a city, we have all been impacted by this. We have all dealt with it in our own ways, but for you, first of all, as just a human being, but second of all, as a father, as a mayor, how has this and that event changed you or impacted you for the rest of your life?
Well, it's still pretty raw, as you could tell. And I don't want it to define us. I've said that. It will be a part of our history, but I want it relegated to a footnote.
Yeah.
I don't want it won't define us. It won't define who we are. We're unique. We use this resilience term. Sometimes I think it's overworked, but I think that's part of our DNA when we've been here for over 350 years, actually 360 years since 1659. We've been here 100 years before the United States ever was.
Yeah.
And we've seen wars and revolutions, and we've survived it all. And it's who we are. And, it's just, it's hard to quantify. It's hard to explain who we are and what we're about, because we have a unique heritage. We're the largest binational, bicultural, bilingual region in the Western Hemisphere, and there's nowhere else like us. We are totally unique, and that's what it's hard to explain. It's hard to say.
To let people,
It's hard to articulate. I've done the best I can, but the point is, it's just we're special.
Yeah. Obviously, that's not the only big event that you've had to deal with in your time as the mayor. Right now, we're currently in the middle of a pandemic, and this is a whole nother aspect. You were just talking about mental health, and this is something that is very important to me. So I love hearing you talk about it all the time, is the mental health aspect of it and how it can be affecting people. And so why is it so important to you to bring that up to people? Because I know myself, I always tell people, go to therapy, or talk to your friends, check on your family members, check on the elderly that you know. But why is it so important to you? Because I always hear you bring it up, the mental health aspect of the COVID pandemic.
Because it's a part of the I don't want to call it pain and suffering, but it's part of the challenges we're having to deal with. Whether it's the economic issue or the physical health issue, it's there.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk on a national basis. They talk about the mental health issue, and the impact it's had. And I don't want to dismiss that. I think too many times people dismiss that. It's real. It's a part of it. It's something we're going to have to deal with. On the financial side, from an economic standpoint, I have said we're not going to reopen our economy. We're going to have to rebuild it. We're getting closer. I set up an economic recovery task force to get input, but from the business community. But we're until we have a vaccine, we have to figure out how to live with this thing. And the only way we can truly stop the spread that the epidemiologists talk about is wearing the face coverings, social distancing, and the hygiene. So
you talk about rebuilding the economy, which I think is completely correct, because it's not going to be just a small repair. No, we're going to have to restructure and rebuild from the bottom up. How do you see El Paso doing that? How do you see our city getting past this, or even being able to live in it until, you're right, we do get a vaccine?
Well, we've got some unique opportunities. The Borderplex Alliance, which is our private sector outreach for economic development, works in conjunction with the Economic Development Department of the city. And we've got more, ironically, we have more prospects right now than we've ever had during the pandemic. We've got more activity. The announcement for Amazon was a positive, and it will continue. That's why we went after the headquarters, going back to the whole premise that people just don't know us until they come see us. I mean, I knew our chances were slim or none when I agreed for the city to attempt to go after the Amazon headquarters. I mean, I knew it would be an uphill challenge.
Well, Jeff Bezos is from Albuquerque. I was like, he's familiar with the area, maybe.
Well, he's also got Blue Origin over in Sierra Blanca.
Yeah, that's what I was like, maybe.
Plus the fact that we are the only community that has ever brought in the recent times, 50,000 people and had $5 to $7 billion, actually about $7 billion of investment when we did Fort Bliss and the BRAC process, which I was part of that team. And so we had actually done it. We had expanded. We'd brought in that many people when you look at the troops and their dependents.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know of anybody, other community that had ever done that. So we had a track record to be able to do it. I believe our human capital is unsurpassed in
because the average age in El Paso is what, I think?
31. Well, 31. The average age for our entire region of 2.7 million people, when you take Juarez and southern New Mexico, is 31. I mean, I've said on many occasions, I believe we have more value in our human capital resources here than there is in the oil in the Permian Basin.
And you brought up an interesting point too, because you said the pandemic, where you would think a lot of areas, cities like San Francisco, New York, all these cities where people are kind of fleeing them right now, but they're coming to areas like El Paso. You're looking at somewhere where I can take my San Francisco salary and go live in El Paso and live like a king. Why am I not going to do that?
Plus, we don't have earthquakes and fires.
Oh, but you have no idea how much that makes me excited. Everyone I look back home, like, are you still doing good over there? Because we're doing great over here. Land's flat. It's not shaking. It's great. Do you see some of these businesses that are starting to contact the city and saying, hey, like maybe we should go look over there? Because, you know, a lot of them do go to Austin, but you do see the prices, the properties, everything up there.
Well, some of the suppliers, Tesla going to Austin, some of their suppliers have contacted us.
Interesting.
So we're, you know, and you look at Juarez and the manufacturing and the distribution area here. I mean, we're an international play for a lot of firms, and people don't understand that. You look upon us not as a border community, but as an international opportunity.
You think your previous experience in your career, of course, of being a successful business owner, is this also you're able to use it with all these businesses coming in and showing them, like, look, this is what El Paso can give to you. This is all the different things we have available.
Yes, I think it's a contributor. I started doing economic development back when the Chamber of Commerce was the private sector outreach back in the 90s. I chaired that area. I helped bring in ADP. And then I was fortunate enough to be involved in a group called the Young Presidents Organization. And I served on the International Board of Directors for YPO and was chairman of the board. And so I met CEOs all over the world. And Dare and I were able to travel the world for about a year. And so, you know, I had opportunities, and I'll leverage whatever relationships I have.
I was going to say, like, these are good connections to have.
The leverage, yeah. There's usually someone somewhere I can figure out how to get in front of.
So we're talking about the future of El Paso, and one of the things I find interesting too is in Texas, a lot of the large cities, when you look at the tax base, especially like Dallas, it's usually around 70% is off of business, and then the other is off of residential. But El Paso is kind of flipped the other way.
Yeah, we're inverted. We're 70% residential and about 30% commercial.
How would you see in the future El Paso being able to get closer, at least even to just 50-50?
Well, I'd love to be 50-50.
Yeah.
There are a couple areas that we need to do to balance out. Number one is on the sales tax revenues, which will come with, we have more conventions and hotels,
right,
et cetera. And now we have the downtown hotels opening up so we can do conventions. 18% of our revenues for the city are coming from sales taxes. And you take North Texas, before the pandemic and others, they could have as much as 30%. So we can increase that, which will offset some of the impact on residential property taxpayers. But the other is commercial capital investment. Mm-hmm. And the last couple of recruits we're going after, or I say recruits, the prospects we're going after. In fact, as I hope to announce one in the very near future. In the
I
last
heard you
couple
say
of
that
weeks.
the other day, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's a biggie.
Still
It's
not
biggie,
good.
but it'll be a significant capital investment. It's what we need more capital investment. We need
right.
businesses that come in and invest major capital, major dollars, more so than we need businesses that come in, will lease a large space and hire a bunch of employees, because their commitment level is not of the same caliber
right.
as if you make significant investments into property and equipment, et cetera. So we seem to have, as I said, ironically speaking, in the middle of a pandemic, more prospects and more visits and more discussions than we've ever had. And then we've got some international opportunities. Great Britain is talking to us because they're going from their Brexit to look for trading partners. Texas is their largest trading partner in the United States, and Borderplex and I had a conversation, I think about a week and a half ago, with trade representatives out of Houston representing Great Britain to talk about what we could do here. So, I mean, those are all kinds of opportunities.
So there's, especially in the city of El Paso, there's a lot of hope that coming out of this pandemic, we're going to see more job opportunities in this area growing.
Yes, and some things might, the pundits out there talk about the changing and, whether or not you're going to occupy offices or be at home or wherever. And I still think I prefer people getting together. I like to see people face to face. I think it engenders more creativity that way than it does through a Zoom call.
No, I agree with that. You probably are, when it comes to El Paso, probably one of the most visible mayors, obviously because of everything you've had to deal with. We see you on the news, regular news, international news, national news. Do you like being in front of the cameras, or would you rather be behind the scenes, just like doing it in the back, making deals, getting the economy up again in the city? Or do you see like the media as just something you have to do for the job?
Well, as a CEO, I was always interested in results. Okay? So if appearing on national media provides some opportunity for investment and the results and jobs and things like that, sure, I'll do whatever I got to do. But is it my normal nature? No. Contrary to what people may think, I'm really kind of introverted.
Okay, no, I would definitely guess you're an introvert. I would have never thought an extrovert.
No, I'm happy to go home. I'm happy to babysit my grandchildren. That's really the main thing. I mean, people ask me, why are you mayor? And I said, I have fifth generation El Pasoan grandchildren. That's the only reason I'm mayor. If I didn't care about them, I probably wouldn't be. My business sold in 2012. I was semi-retired. I did the EPISD Board of Managers, which was an interesting 2 years. I learned a lot about our education system and how it works. And I remind people that 29 cents of your tax dollar is the city, but 46 cents is schools. That's where the dollars go. And the other 25 cents goes to UMC, community college, and the county.
When you look at El Paso in, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, where do you see the city, or where would you hope to see, and especially with another term of you being mayor, where would you like to see the city be at the end of your next term?
Well, I'd like to see the revenue stream on the tax base shifted somewhat, for sure. I think there are some opportunities there. The demographers say we are where Texas will be in the next 15 to 20 years, given our Hispanic makeup and who we are as a region. I would like to see things expanded in Juarez and with the Maquilas, and more so on the border. I think there are some real opportunities to be perceived and portrayed and warranted as an international player. So, I mean, as I say, we are the largest U.S. community, U.S. city on the Mexican border. Mexico is still one of our largest trading partners, if not the largest trading partner. I think it is, last year was the largest trading partner for the United States. So consequently, I mean, I think we are poised to be a leader there. When you look at UTEP and what it brings to the table, when we look at Texas Tech and the new dental school, and of course you've got the medical school, you've got the nursing schools, both at UTEP and Tech and other institutions around here, I think there's some real opportunities for us. I'd like to see more going on in medical health research.
Yeah.
I think our demographics lend themselves to that. I'm the presiding officer for the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, and we're putting out $300 million a year in research grants. We don't have enough coming here. The majority of it goes to the I-35 corridor from UT Southwest all the way down to MD Anderson and Baylor, et cetera. But we're building some infrastructure to allow that research to continue. We were funding a breast cancer researcher at Texas Tech, and we've got about $45 million here locally for prevention grants for cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings, and things like that. We have a lot of issues related to liver cancer here, diabetes, and that's what's part of our problem with our underlying conditions under COVID. If you're a diabetic and you have hypertension, high blood pressure, you're susceptible.
Yeah. Do you ever see potentially being a law school coming out to El Paso? Because I know we do, especially with all the issues with immigration and the border. Do you see, is that something also that could be beneficial to have in this region?
Oh, I think anything along those lines would be. I know a number of years ago when my wife was on the higher ed coordinating board, there was discussion about Texas Tech expanding a law school down here, and that didn't materialize. There was kind of I don't remember, some political play back and forth, but I think anything that will help our
region.
economy, region, sure, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think UTEP's doing some things that I think will be significant, have significant value in the next year or two.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for meeting me. I was excited to learn more about you. And then also, I just, where in El Paso can we see Margo if we wanted to go, let's say, on a Saturday morning to get breakfast somewhere? Where is like your number one spot we're going to be hitting?
You'd have to come to my house.
Okay, if we had to go to a restaurant.
Oh, you know, I still, I think one of our favorites is H&H Car Wash for breakfast. That's a classic. There always takes people there. I still love L&J. I still, you know, there are a variety of places I like. But normally what I'm doing on the weekends, on Friday, we usually babysit our grandchildren. So they're at home, and we're either taking them out or it just depends. I got a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
And how do you think UTEP's going to do this season in football?
Well, now that they've got 2 wins.
I mean, there is hope.
There is hope.
There's a little bit of hope. And the Cowboys?
I'm a diehard Cowboy fan.
I know you are.
I watched them win yesterday. It was tremendous. So
here's to hoping for just, I would say, good Texas football in general then in the next.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Sure. Thank you.